I'm here to introduce the keynote speaker, who is David Willetts, the Minister of State for Universities and Science. He's also popularly known around Westminster by the nickname of Two Brains, which nobody quite knows who coined the nickname, but it's understood to refer to not only how clever he is, but the intellectual and academic approach he takes to government policy. And he promises us that's something he's going to deliver today as he applies both of the brains to how the government is responding to the innovation and how it's changing scientific research and government policy on access to that research. And so I'll invite David Willetts to come up on the stage now and address us, and then there'll be time for some questions from the audience afterwards.
Well, great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to join you here at this event. And I very much look forward to the questions and the discussion. But I'd just like to start with a paradox that will be familiar to you all, because here you are experts, far greater experts than I am, on the development of the web and the virtual world that we all live in. But you have physically come to this place to meet face-to-face for the exchange of ideas. And I think if someone worked out the total number of miles traveled by this audience to get here today, and for all the different events you've been participating in, and the hours of travel, it would be a pretty large figure. But on the other hand, if there are any people who are skilled in the use of the net and the ability to operate virtually, it's the people here today. And that, I think, tells us something quite important about what can and cannot happen on the web, at least as so far as we understand it. Thomas Friedman famously wrote that the world is flat. But the evidence is that the world isn't flat. The evidence is exactly the opposite. The world is actually rather lumpy. And people use the increasing freedoms they have not to kind of spread out evenly across the world, but to congregate, to cluster, to gather together. And indeed, my kind of gurus are much more Richard Florida on the creative class, and also saying there are three big decisions you take in your life: what you do, who you live with, and where you live. And that third decision is as important as the other two, but far less studied. And of course, Michael Porter, himself a great advocate of clustering. So my view is that one of the paradoxes that's worth wrestling with is how in a mobile society you end up with so many people needing still to meet up physically to exchange ideas. And this is very important for the development of our policies on science and innovation, because we have to go with the reality of creativity coming from dense clusters. There are small clusters, and there are larger clusters. The small cluster, one economic definition is a small cluster is a place where you can change jobs without having to change where you park your car. And I guess that parking reference reminds me of one of the more cynical definitions of a modern university, a place run by autonomous heads of department, united only by a shared grievance about parking. So we do cluster together to be creative and innovative. It's what Tech City is about, and I guess it's one of the reasons why Google have set up your very exciting Shoreditch campus. It's also why we are committed to investing in some of the most dynamic specific clusters that we've got. The Laboratory of Molecular Biology at Cambridge is probably the post-war world's most creative and successful scientific laboratory, essentially where a lot of the advances in genetics have occurred. And I was there at the new building that's being built at the moment. They're just finally moving out of their 1960s block into a new building that'll open in the next couple of years. And there are going to be no coffee machines anywhere in the building apart from on the top floor, the big space that has the best views, where they want all the researchers from different disciplines to mix. And for a similar reason, we're investing in the Crick Institute in King's Cross in London, going to be one of the world's largest life science centers when it's created. So we've got those type of clusters, those highly specific contained clusters, where We can help them by providing some of the infrastructure and services and supporting them as we've done with Tech City. Then secondly, there are the bigger clusters, which I define as places where you can move jobs without having to move your family, where you don't have to take your kid out of school as you move from job to job. How those are created, again, it's not really under the control of government. As you know, there's such a lively debate now about the origins of Silicon Valley. One of the theories that rather appeals to me is when the Californian Supreme Court struck down non-compete clauses in labor market contracts, created that kind of mobility from job to job that has been crucial for the dynamism of Silicon Valley. And when I go to meet academics and venture capitalists at Oxford or Cambridge, I'm struck by the fact that one of their top asks of government is, please, can we have, once more, a fast transport link between Oxford and Cambridge? There used to be a railway line. Tragically, the tracks were all ripped up, and in parts, it's been built over. But that's one of their asks, because they would like to be able to have a career in which you could move around in the golden cluster, Oxford, Cambridge, London, without the disruption that, sadly, families still face. And we can do things to encourage and support these type of clusters, though, again, governments can't create them, by, for example, rewarding collaborative research. And I'm very keen to see networks of universities working together. We've got networks in the north, N8, a network in the southwest, Set Squared, bringing together leading research universities. Because one thing is clear, universities are at the heart of these dynamic and creative clusters. And that's the logic linking my responsibilities as Minister for Science and for universities. There's a paradox here as well, which is that it's in the US and the UK that we have seen the triumphant success of a German idea of a university. The original idea of the research university was advocated just over 200 years ago by Humboldt, as Prussia had an anguished debate about why they had performed so badly in the Napoleonic Wars. It opened up a debate about the reform of Prussia, and Humboldt argued for research-based universities as crucial for the emergence of a modern Prussia, and was proved right. Eventually, of course, his creations collapsed, sadly, or were deeply damaged by fascism and then, in many cases, communism. If you go to the Humboldt University in Berlin today, you will see a fantastic, you walk up the main staircase with a fantastic list of Nobel Prize-winning great scientists, Heisenberg and Niels Bohr and others, but it stops in 1930. And in the constitutional settlement since in Germany, they have separated research from university function. So it's in the US and the UK that we have research-based universities. In Germany, they have excellent universities, but they mainly do teaching, and their research is carried out at independent institutes like Max Planck Institutes, Fraunhofer Institutes. And incidentally, if they were counted in the research rankings for universities, they would score very highly, but they are not officially universities. So my challenge as the Minister for Universities is to try to ensure that we carry on delivering that mix of teaching and research. And there's been a lot of controversy about our proposed changes to the financing of universities, but we think it's fair and progressive when money is tight to expect graduates, not undergraduates, not students, but graduates after they've graduated, after they're earning more than £21,000 a year, to pay back for the cost of their university education through a higher rate of income tax until the cost has been paid off. And that shift away from grants from the government and instead towards money going with the student paid back by graduates has enabled us to maintain, if anything, increase the amount of cash going into teaching in our universities during the life of this Parliament. And when it comes to research, we've been able to protect the science budget, but what I'm trying to do is to get more collaboration, more cooperation between often intensely competitive research institutes. But these universities are at the center of what we call smart cities. And there's another paradox here. One of our comparative advantages in Britain is that we were the first country in the world to urbanize. We were the first country to go, in the 19th century, through a crucial social and cultural barrier when more than half of your population lives in a city. And we see that as rather a significant source of expertise and experience which can drive research and indeed commercial opportunities today. Because what we went through in the 19th century is the experience of many emerging economies today. Urbanization and what you need in order to operate a intensely populated city in parts of the world that have not previously had that experience is a fantastic intellectual and commercial challenge, and one, of course, in which services online play a crucial part. But the other half of the paradox is despite that historic experience, after you've allowed for London, probably the world's greatest city, I have to say, after you've allowed for London, if you take our next 8 cities, 7 of them have GDP in Britain below the national average. So it's crucial that we rediscover the strengths and back the Birminghams, the Manchesters, the Leeds, the cities which have also been of great significance to our economy in the past and which we are backing again with our city deals. Let me conclude very briefly by moving on from this rather physical account of people clustering and people gathering together and the role of universities and research labs and cities with where you are the experts, the shift towards a virtual world as well. And I recognize that this is going to transform just about everything where I have ministerial responsibility. I still think we will have universities as physical places where people gather. We're seeing investment in new law universities today, but often they don't have a law library. That can go online. And the interesting question will be the blended learning, where people combine a lot of the learning and access to intellectual resource, which can happen online, and the points where people still wish to gather in a seminar or for the exchange of ideas. Different institutions will have different mixes. The Open University is classically one of the world's great centers for distance learning, and we look forward to that expanding and growing around the world. But it's not just teaching, it's also research. Last year, 1.7 million academic articles were published, 400,000 of them, incidentally, in British-based journals. We're a very serious player in academic publishing. And we're trying to get our heads around the big changes that are happening here. And indeed, today we are announcing the creation of the Open Data Institute, which is going to help us think through precisely these issues. But I'm clear that the next generation of research is going to require data mining and also, slightly trickier set of issues, text mining, so that the medics, for example, who can no longer physically be expected even to read the articles on their particular specialism, will be able to have sophisticated sorting and ranking arrangements that enable them still to access the information that they need. And as I look to the future of scientific inquiry, I'm absolutely clear that, as they say, the next paradigm, the fourth paradigm of scientific inquiry, is going to be based on very large data sets. And this is my final point to you, because it's another parallel between the world of research and science and the commercial world. Scientists are in the lead in handling very large data sets. The data you get from the Hubble telescope or from the Large Hadron Collider are massive data sets. And they have built up skills in handling those large data sets, and we continue to invest in them. I was able to announce a further investment of £165 million in high-performance computing last autumn. That's partly the physical stuff you need. A lot of it is also to support the writing of the software that enables, for example, parallel computing properly to function. We still, in Britain, have specific skills in algorithms in the production of software. We back those. We want to see more links made between academic researchers handling large data sets and companies that need large data sets. So that instead of prototyping happening with a physical construction of a prototype, it involves virtual modeling of the complete functioning of a Rolls-Royce engine or a Jaguar Land Rover car. That's clearly the future, and we're trying to bring together the range of expertise we have in this country in making that happen. But the most exciting thing that the experts tell me is that we're now in that great story of the Persian king who offers the inventor of chess any award that he wants, and the inventor of chess says he would simply like a grain of wheat on the first square on the chessboard, 2 grains of wheat on the second square, compounding onwards, which the king of Persia famously agreed. And as he got onto the second or third row, he realized that his country didn't have the capacity to produce the number of grains of wheat that were required. We are now on the second half of the chessboard. The volumes of data coming out are now enormous, and the challenge of handling that is going to be crucial for our researchers. It's going to be crucial for business. It's going to shape the future of our countries, and it's the people in this room who have the expertise in knowing how it's going to happen. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much for that. We've got time for a few questions from the audience, if anybody wants to ask about text or data mining or any of these other things. Where have we got a microphone in place? We'll go to number 2 first.
Minister, thank you for that. About academic publishing, are you in favor of the proposition that all research that is funded by the taxpayer ought to be published in journals which are open access and free?
I'm in favor of open access to publicly refunded research. I think that academic journals add value. In other words, I don't think they're simply parasitical extractors of rent. So we have asked Janet Finch to report to us on how we get there. And there are essentially, as you know, 2 routes. One route is the gold route, which I find very attractive, where you say instead of academic research being paid for by the university library or the individual getting the journal, part of the research grant includes a payment that covers the cost of the release of the data. And there are some costs in the release of the data, and you handle it that way. That's one model. The second model, as you know, is green access, in which you require that the material be available publicly. But in order for the journals to remain viable and their functions still to be financed, you have a kind of half-life rule where for 6 months, 12 months, and it could vary from discipline to discipline, the material is available for subscribers, and then it becomes available. So Janet Finch will be advising us on how we proceed. It will probably be some combination of gold and green. But at the end of the day, we will have public access to the material that has been publicly financed through research.
Thank you. Now, we're running a little late, but we've got time for probably 3 or 4 questions. There was an enthusiast down there at number 3.
Thanks, Minister. You mentioned at the start of your talk about the importance of developing technology skills in the UK skills base. You're probably aware that various figures have been said about saying we need 200, 300, 400,000 more people with IT skills in the IT profession over the next 5 to 10 years. You're probably also aware that at almost every level of education there is increasingly less interest in technology as a subject. GCSE and A-level numbers dropping, computer science graduates among the highest unemployment of graduates, and the number of people working in IT under the age of 30 is significantly less as a proportion now than it was 10 years ago. A danger there that we're losing a generation of people who should be coming in at the bottom end of the IT profession and the technology industries to build what we need to build with technology. I'm interested in your observations on that and what you think needs to be done.
Well, you're absolutely right about the problem, and the problem was kind of being discussed in various groups of experts until Eric Schmidt, with his McTaggart lecture last September, brought it out into the open. And it was a really crucial contribution to the debate. It energized the debate. I mean, we had already done some things. Of course, I'm responsible for the university end. My colleague Michael Gove is responsible at the school end. We've already done some things like competitions for teenagers to propose and write apps for mobile phones, and Google and others have got involved in trying to bring the school curriculum to life. But it's clear that at all levels, the IT, computer science courses in schools, colleges, and universities, instead of providing us with another generation of people keen to enter this industry, seem catastrophically just to be very boring and putting people off. And Michael is gripping this at the school level. I don't have direct control over universities, and a good thing too, but we are also promoting links, including between the IT businesses and universities, so that their computer science courses meet the needs of contemporary business.
When are we going to see a new plan for teaching in schools, though?
Well, Michael has already kind of cancelled, if you like, the old curriculum, and we've already got trials going on of new ways of teaching IT and computer science in schools, where essentially, instead of a passive consumer model, we've got a creative constructor-producer model. And it's already happening. My understanding is that over the next year, what's already happening in some schools as experiments is going to be developed into a proper agreed curriculum on the basis, as I say, of experiments that are already happening in schools across the country.
Okay, we've got room for another question, number 4.
Hi. If I may, I'd like to ask a question about a very specific point that you raised, which is about text processing. I agree that it's a key area of study, and I think it's one of those problems which, if Britain's to play any role in solving it, and actually if it's going to be, if the challenges in that area are going to be solved, it requires a concerted effort, probably over several years, with a lot of drive behind it. My question is, what can you and the rest of government do to try and foster that to happen? Because I think if that's a challenge that you guys can help solve, that would put Britain in a pole position.
Yeah, and it is a very tricky challenge. I think, Hargreaves has taken some important steps forward. There's still a lot of work to do in implementing his report, and further areas where we're consulting further. But I think Hargreaves has helped, and organisations with orphan works like the British Library are advising us on how we can help unlock some of their resource, how we can provide a framework within academic research for academic texts to be easily available. Then there's a lot of technical stuff about getting common standards and how we pay for common standards. All I can say is there's a lot of work going on here. And incidentally, it goes back to the original question on academic publishing. The reason why I began by saying academic publishing does add some value is one of the things that we can work with academic publishers to do is common standards that make their texts all easily accessible. And that's one of the things we want to see them investing in. So yeah, but the government absolutely recognises the significance of this, and working with Jeremy Hunt and Ed Vasey and DCMS, we're trying to tackle it.
And we're going to be talking about wider copyright and piracy issues at the very next discussion. Let's take one more question, and then the Minister will have to go down at the front here.
Hi, Minister. I graduated 10 years ago with a good degree in computer science, and I was refused a bank loan for my startup because of the large levels of student debt that I'd accumulated. I now earn about the same as an MP, and I'm still paying off a large amount of student debt. What impact do you think this huge rise in student fees and student loans is going to have on the UK technology scene as more and more graduates graduate in tens of thousands of pounds of debt?
What was your student debt? Did you have a mortgage-style loan?
Yes, so I ended up with £12,000–13,000, which is being repaid at 9% over, 9% above earnings. So it's
Yeah.
the new style loan, but still with £12,000 of debt, I wasn't able to get a startup loan. Graduates now having £30,000, £40,000 worth of debt. What's that going to do to our startup scene?
At the moment, in the current system which we've inherited, you pay back, as you say, 9% on your earnings above £15,000 a year. I actually think of it as it's not like a credit card debt when you leave university. It's actually an obligation to pay back through the tax system at that rate of 9%. But you're absolutely right about the pressures that young people face, which is why we have raised the threshold from £15,000 to £21,000, so that the monthly repayments that graduates will pay in future under our system will be smaller than the repayments that you pay. And when we have consulted the financial services industry say that what they look at is your fixed monthly outgoings. So your fixed monthly outgoings under our system will be lower than they are at the moment. In the old system, if you're earning £25,000 a year and you're paying back 9% of £15,000, that is that's a large amount that you'll be paying, £900. That will be £900 a year, £75 a month. Under our system, if you're on 25,000 and the threshold is now 21,000, you'll be paying back on 9% of your earnings of £4,000, which is £30 a month. So we're lowering the monthly repayments. You pay them back for longer, but we smooth the repayments out through the life cycle so as to ease the burdens on people in their 20s and 30s.
But banks look at your total debt.
Well,
Banks look at your total debt, not your monthly repayments.
Well,
and if you've got £30,000 of debt, you can't get a loan for a startup.
It is not a debt which is taken account of in any commercial negotiations. It's not part of bankruptcy. Banks look at your fixed outgoings, and it's not a mortgage. It's not a credit card debt. It is not a bank loan. It is essentially saying that you will pay a rather higher rate of income tax, 29%, not 20%, until you have paid back the cost of your higher education. And if at any point your earnings fall below 21,000, at that point all repayments stop until and unless your incomes rise again. And in my experience, and obviously I've spoken to quite a few people in the financial service industry, in my experience, the financial service industry absolutely understand that. It is a fixed monthly outgoing. It is not a pile of debt to which anyone can have any access through any commercial debt collecting procedure, because it isn't commercial debt.
All right. With that, I'm afraid we will have to leave it there and move on to our next discussion. But first, let's all say thank you very much to David Willetts for being with us. Thank you. And we will move on to our next panel discussion.